How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? It is Zimzilla back again, once again, and today it's Thanksgiving. So you all are probably enjoying yourselves with family, drinking some beer if you're old enough, eating some food, or otherwise just lounging about, having the most wonderful time of your lives. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, I decided it was a great day to do some streaming. And as a result, hello. This makes for some of the uploads this week because I've decided to continue doing the 3 uploads a week. So it means I'm always up on my toes, always providing more content for you guys. Which, if you guys are always enjoying the content that you see here, always give it a like. And if you're being super generous, a subscription would be even better. But if you want to reach me or if you just want to talk with people, the Discord is the best way to get a hold of us and just interact with the community. I'll put that in the link right there for everyone. But without further ado, let's see who is at least talking in chat. So we've got Rusty. How's it going, Rusty? Hey, Minecraft is going to be solo or group. Nah, this is primarily just going to be solo since it is going to be solo and it's a Thanksgiving upload. And it's not like, unfortunately, it's not like the Adam Does Movies one where there's a lot of build up to it, where there's a little bit of back and forth before then. And then there was so much content I got to cover that it meant a longer stream. This one's a pretty small one, although there's a big source list I'll be putting in the description once the video ends that I do want to share with people so that people can just, check my sources. And if they want to compare notes, I always love doing that. Oh, indeed it is. It is the biggest O. How's it going, Alice? Good to see you as always. Antonio from the other side of the globe. It's probably either getting close to very, very late where you are, or it is already extremely late where you are. But otherwise, thank you always for stopping in, giving some chats and all of that fun stuff. You choose Thanksgiving while I'm at the keys to do this. Well, I had to do it someday. This is like my only day off. That's the one thing about having multiple jobs is that, especially with one of my main job, it means I do not get any rest tomorrow. Tomorrow does not mean I get to go shop, have a wonderful time, and harass retail people. I am the harassed tomorrow. So yeah, that's gonna be fun. Thanksgiving dinner with the church. Oh, that's fun. That's really fun. I know that ours is probably going to be doing that probably this coming Sunday rather than doing it on Thanksgiving Day proper. That's more of they let us do that with our families so that we can sort of have that family moment. I already did all that fun stuff, and there's a other function that the rest of the folks are going to. So that leaves me alone by myself, talking to the voices in my head, which are just the comments like you, Blackaroni. You are one of the voices in my head. Just like Sci-Fi Gog. It's just, you're the voice in my head. Aloha. I didn't know I could speak Spanish. Javara, I'm here. Another voice in my head. More Minecraft World. You may have a dinner at a restaurant later tonight. Hey, that sounds fun. That sounds real fun. Of course, I know you're out of the States, so that's probably fun. It's probably very warm where you are. It's pretty warm where I am as well. It's got like that perfect fall weather, so I know I'm definitely probably going to go for like a walk or a jog after this. We, ourselves, and us, yeah, because we are Zim, as the voices in my head continue to tell me. But we're just going to do a little bit more of a preamble here. If anyone has any questions for what is going to be coming up with December, I will be glad to answer them because December is going to be Dino-cember. So a lot of the streams and the like, as well as topics, I want to be more dinosaur focused, or at least more dinosaur adjacent than things used to be. But not Spanish, Hawaiian. Aloha. Well, geez, I can already tell that I'm tired, I'm strung out, and the voices in my head are now arguing with me when I said you're Spanish. Jeez. We are, Zim. We carry the flame. Indeed, indeed. But when it comes to this video, so what I like to do and how I like to torture myself every single day is I'll go on YouTube after looking at everything else schizophrenic, is look at Godzilla video essays. I will literally type in the search bar Godzilla video essays, and it's usually like the same video essays I have seen like for years and years on end. But then sometimes you get something that's a little bit more on the interesting side. Like you'll get someone like this, which is this the most offensive Godzilla film? Now, there's a lot of things people consider to be offensive in the Godzilla series. I know probably the rational mind would say that no, in most cases, most Godzilla films aren't offensive for one reason or another. Some might point to Terra Mecha Godzilla because the Japanese version has the artificial biddies. Because I can't say those words because we're only 5 minutes into the video. But yeah, the artificial biddies in Terra Mecha Godzilla. Some people might say that. Others might say the blackface that's in King Kong versus Godzilla is the most offensive. Anything else? Oh, the quote unquote Japanese war apologia in Godzilla minus one and the quasi mashism. Because again, I'm not sure. Nowadays with YouTube, you don't know whether or not like one word is gonna absolutely tank the analytics of a video or a stream for that matter. But yeah, the mashism in Godzilla minus one, so that might be the most offensive. Any other chat? If there's anything else in a Godzilla film that could be considered offensive, what can we think of? Praising more praising of mashism in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, or quasi endorsement of imperialism because Japan buys up every single country in the future in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. That might be it. Who knows? But apparently the most offensive Godzilla film is a re-edit, the second re-edit that we've ever gotten for a Godzilla film, Gigantis the Fire Monster. And let's see, we really need to wonder whether or not these claims of offense are actually true. But there's one problem when it comes to almost anything when you're making a claim about offense, where there is no true tangible way to prove like damages with an offense for the most part. Like anyone could say anything and you could claim offense for that. And in certain people's eyes, there is a huge amount of legitimacy for that. But that's neither here nor there. Intestine Inspector, how's it going? Polygon Cholichis Bill Saludo. Oh yeah, they are, they're squats, facial features, like I guess like a weird form of eugenics or something like that, or phylogeny. I think that's the term. Mashism. You mean the one with the F that's used a lot? Yes, mashism. That's what I'll use because I was thinking of the TV series MASH and I was trying to think of a word to skirt around it. So yeah. That claims the mashism. Again, I'm trying to skirt around it because I got like two minutes left. 2 minutes left before I can start like saying these words. But as for this film, I find Gigantis the Fire Monster interesting just because of the fact that it is telling of the times that this film came over to America. I was going to say produced. It's due to the fact that you have Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is edited, but it's edited in a way where pretty much most of the original film is preserved. Whereas with Gigantis, most of the film is preserved because it is a straight dub rather than a re-edit. But unlike King of the Monsters, where for the most part, everything is on the up and up, pretty standard when it comes to dubs, where you're trying to follow lip movements, things of that nature. But the biggest change being that you have Godzilla, who is now a household name, having a name change to Gigantis. The main reason that we know is that they did not want to, for example, the classic media, which Steve Rifle is a part of, mentions that Schreiben wanted them not to confuse Gigantis with Godzilla, and what is expounded upon in other material that Rifle also wrote is that they wanted to do an entirely new sort of sequel because they felt that sequels did not do as well financially as compared to wholly original stories. Now, that is definitely the case. At least looking at America, you have, for example, Creature from the Black Lagoon that releases in 1954. And then the following year, just like Raids Again, you have Revenge of the Creature, which is looked at far more poorly. And then the year right after that, you have The Creature Walks Again from 56. that also just was not reviewed and looked at as fondly. And with Godzilla King of the Monsters, notably, Raids Again actually did pretty well. The box office, at least in Japan, was pretty good. However, in America, sequels were seen just not as favorably. At least even when it comes to giant monsters, you have King Kong from 1933, and then you have Son of Kong from the same year. I'd say Son of Kong, interestingly enough, has a similar like run back time as a lot of the Godzilla films. And unless you're like a really big King Kong fan, I doubt almost anyone like remembers anything from Son of Kong for the most part. So there is that, and there is things like serials that are being released in that time period, and serials would be released like throughout years and years. But at least in the case of serials, there's a level of disconnect that comes with film serials where the characters are put in wholly different locations, although like tropes of a genre will appear, especially Western serials, for example. But overall, there isn't this direct continuation and continuity that you see with films nowadays or in the future, especially when it comes to like blockbusters and having direct sequels one after the other. But we've passed the 10-minute mark, so I guess we can actually get into the video. But before I do, I want to showcase the one stream submission that we got right before the stream started, and that's from Minecraft World. And since Gamer Day had come up, we wanted to do a little piece that Minecraft's working on that has all of our Gamer characters. So there was my design from Gamer Fortuous. There's Hoshi's Gamera, and then O5's Gamera, which is right up here in the background, and probably Minecraft's going to keep on working on that. And when that final piece is ready, we'll be able to show that on stream. And I just want to say, I noticed a bunch of people joined in. So, Frederico, how's it going? Hello. Nico, what's up? What's up? And God Goji, what's up as well? You have returned. What are we doing today? Well, talking about how Gigantis is offensive. And now 10 minutes, like I say, it's offensive and it's racist. So let's actually see if that claim holds water, shall we? The most offensive Godzilla film. And of course, this is a Zimcast original, so that means we doing it on, 1.5 times speed. It is a 28-minute video. I want to do it 2 times speed, but I know that's always the best for everyone.
With a franchise as large and diverse as Godzilla, not every entry is going to work for people. The beautiful thing about the series is that there's something for everyone. Those who prefer the more brain-rot destruction, over-the-top action, or absolute goobery. Even still, there are some titles in the franchise that get a lot of flack. Some of it deserved.
I want to say this for later, but there's a few things that I wish I had a little graphic for. One of those would be like Megalon Dropkick, which we got, Mega Gear's Body Slam, that was another, and 98 Slander, but I always allow that. I always allow 98 Slander. That is fine in my books. And then Godzilla's Revenge Slander. So like we're already just 28 seconds into this video, and we already had Megalon Dropkick, we had Mega Gear's Body Slam, and Revenge Slander.
There's one film I always thought was perhaps a tad bit overhated. That is Godzilla's first sequel, Raids Again. Now, the original premise of this video was going to be examining Raids Again, which we are going to do, looking at its pros and cons, but something stood out even more in making this video. That is the US version, which very well might be the most offensive film in the series.
Hey, look, we got our first ad. So it is the Zimcast, sponsored by the official Godzilla store, guys. Pick up the new Shin Godzilla 4-disc box set, which I even got myself, and hopefully we get that Shin debate sooner rather than later, but who knows.
It was cute. It wasn't cute. It was racist. I disagree, man. She was just...
So there we go. Let me also do this on stream for you guys. There we are. Perfect. I hope we caught that on stream. So get my drink ready, and we'll be doing a tally. If someone else in chat wants to do this, please, oh please, tally up how many times racist is used in this video. So we got that one tally there. Also, this skit is absolutely hilarious. I would never be able to show it on stream, but that entire bit is awesome. I love it. It is so irreverent. It is the best thing ever. What if the 2001 Godzilla film featured Ghidorah, Anguirus, and Megalon instead of Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah? That would be a very weird combination, Float Pie, which also in that case, hello, welcome. I don't think I've ever seen you in before. And yeah, like, so Megalon is very interesting for a pick, and so would be Ghidorah. So Ghidorah as the god of sea, Anguirus as the freezing monster, Megalon as the electricity monster. That'd be an interesting combination. The thing with Ghidorah, I think Ghidorah works better as part of his trio or as part of an ensemble. But comparing those three monsters, I think because Ghidorah is a mutation from an alien, and Anguirus's Awoken were also mutated like Godzilla's, and the Megalon's the Zetopian's monster. Two of them are from Earth. One of them is mutated from a space monster. So like synergy just isn't there compared to like Vera and Baragon and Anguirus. And Baragon's kind of the odd one out in GMK on its own. So there is that. But like for a combination, I would not have expected someone to bring up Ghidorah, Anguirus, and Megalon as that trio. But I do like Ghidorah. Ghidorah is a really fun character and a fun design. I also just generally prefer, example, Ganymedes to Ebera. I think his design's better, but that's just me.
Just an old timer. That's the way people talked back then. Didn't mean they were racist.
Hello, Kobayashi, Kobayashi. I flew through the haze. I looked anxiously below, searching. But there was always the chance that he ditched his plane in shallow water. Down, boy. I guess I honestly wouldn't know what to find. Oh.
Like, I assume that we're saying that because they had, I forget his name, but it's the guy who plays like Barney Rubble, Yogi Bear, and all of those guys, that because he's using that voice to portray a Japanese man and he's white, therefore it's racist. But like, if he's using that voice and he's used it for several different characters, then like you have to like actually explain the racist intents behind that, because I don't really believe you can just say, oh, he's using a goofy like accent for a character, therefore racist. That's like the same thing as how many Japanese studios, especially Japanese animes, will have outrageous like anime characters who are like over the top caricatures of Americans, and someone's saying like, oh yeah, that's racist. I do not see that. I think that that is an entirely bogus claim or implicit assertion that would be made. I don't think he's necessarily making that, but if that is the intention behind it by showing these scenes, then like, what am I supposed to make of that? Question: what is your favorite dinosaur? Mine is Allosaurus. And did you know I scaled the Allosaurus to be solo fiction in reality with negative difficulty? I'm not sure what the rest of that. Oh wait. It's like a power scaling thing. Favorite dinosaur? It's a tie between Carnotaurus and Ceratosaurus. I love both of those dinosaurs. As for the video, it is 28 minutes and 55 seconds. But we're going at 1.5 times speed, so there is that.
Oh, you're too good to me. You must see that thing as a cat. I'll search there.
You're too good to me.
About 5 hours flying time. Check your gas on your radio. No stunts, understand? You're very clear, sir.
You know, come to think of it, my grandmother was kind of a racist.
You think? So, how did that happen? Well, sit back as we dig into the history of these films, looking at the original and discussing the oh-so-deranged US re-edit. This released not even a full year after the first film. Godzilla released November 3rd, 1954 in Japan. Raids Again released April 1955. That's teetering half a year. Well, rush sequels weren't that uncommon back in the day. In the times before home media, quick sequels and theatrical reruns were the only means of longevity for films back then. Lots of these films were made quick and cheap to rack in some dough for the studios without having to spend as much on making them. Godzilla was Toho's big hit and made some moolah. It was commonplace to force sequels, but interestingly enough, the minds behind the original film didn't want to, nor did they plan one out. After all, Godzilla died. That was it. The end. Well, that wasn't until Toho executive producer was, well, very happy with the box office results for Godzilla, so he instructed Tomoyuki Tanaka, the initial creator of Godzilla and producer, to make a sequel. Ishiro Honda did not return as a director, as he was already assigned to another film. There have been conflicting stories on why they didn't wait for Honda, but a new director was chosen, Motoyoshi Oda. Motoyoshi Oda was selected for his work in films with heavy special effects, as well as science fiction. That said, Oda was basically a B-movie director, which pretty much sums up why this movie gives that impression. And choosing Oda was seen as a move that shows that this movie was made with money on the mind, and not something with deeper artistic intention like the predecessor. The screenplay was written by Takeo Murata, who helped.
So the screenplay was written by Takeo Murata, but the original story is by Shigeru Kayama. I actually watched both Gigantis and the original 55 in one sitting last night. And when it comes to how they show it in the film, Kayama is credited before Murata is. So almost any choice story-wise comes from Kayama, with any like screenplay edits for how it's going to be portrayed on screen should be credited to Murata as well as Oda.
Write the original film. Although, mind you, while 2 screenwriters are credited, the story was a Frankenstein concoction of ideas from all of the big heads behind the movie. Tsuburaya, Honda, Tanaka. For them, this was a huge passion project.
That's not really the case. I've never really seen anywhere that suggests Kayama took like a lot of input from Tsuburaya, Murata, and those guys, because interestingly enough, if you read the original book, which I have links for you to buy those in the description, most of, like, I would say 55's novel is closer to its screen than the original 54 is. I would say that would be fair to state that Godzilla 54 was more of a collaborative effort considering the changes that are in the 54 novel. But with the 55 novel, almost everything is one for one of the movie and the book, with some changes being shown in storyboards while others not. Zim, do you know or watched or sorry? Hey Zim, I have a question. Do you know or watched or known about Prehistoric Planet? You know that Payload documentary with ACG Jazz only streaming on Apple TV and the Payload community. Yes, I am aware of Prehistoric Planet. I watched the first one. I have not seen the other one, the Ice Age one. I think that just came out. What if Godzilla fought Mothra in the 80s? Probably similar special effects to Godzilla 84. And Heisei Ebra. What's it called? I don't know. We'd have to see what kind of story they'd add into a Godzilla film that would include Ebra in the Heisei era. Are we going to be referencing the book at some point? We are referencing the book, but there's not really any specific pages or chapters that are really going to need to be included in this. So
Eiji Tsuburaya did return to direct the special effects again for this film, as did Nakajima, one of the principal suit actors for Godzilla in the original, with Katsumi Tezuka, who also played Godzilla at some points, now playing the new monster of the film, Gigantis. Although it had only been a few months, they were able to work some kinks out of the monster suits. The original was intensely heavy and really just dangerous overall to wear. The newer suits were made with molds of the actor's build so they would have more mobility. Even with lighter materials, the suits were still very uncomfortable, and they actually had some animatronic stuff going on here with battery-powered eyes and mouth. Pretty impressive considering the time crunch. Nakajima isn't just the guy who played Godzilla, but really pioneered the art of suit acting in a way that felt convincing on camera, and here it feels like he really was finding his footing. He knew the appropriate speeds for his body to move in accordance to the slower speeds of the cameras, and would work alongside Tsuburaya closely in choreographing the monster action. And let me just say, Nakajima was dedicated. I mean, the amount of explosions and fire that were set off on this man's body, it's a miracle he survived the Showa era. It really is. Several techniques were recycled, such as the hand puppets, which use a spray for the atomic breath. They also had access to a new soundstage, which was used to create larger miniature sets. The story in the film is very simple. A year after Gojira, we move on to a pilot, Tsukioka, played by Hiroshi Kazumi, a familiar face of these films, and his buddy Kobayashi, when Kobayashi's plane malfunctions to make an emergency landing on Iwato Island. Here we are at another island, although it does not hit the same as the on-location shooting of the original, not at all. There, they witness 2 monsters.
well, of course, the location shooting is going to be very different because you're actually having large portions of your story take place on Odo Island versus Iwato Island, which is directly stated to be uninhabited. So that's some non sequitur.
Duking it out, Godzilla and Gigantis. Which, funny enough, most of their screen time in this film is just them fighting each other. And no real build up to it either, they're just already at each other's throats. Why are they fighting? Territorial? Who knows? Maybe he disrespected Anguirus or stepped on his tail. Watching this on an HD screen will certainly point out some of the more quickly made optical illusions, such as placing our 2 heroes here under the monsters. I
definitely want to make note of this shot because I did mention this in my Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again review, where this scene is different in the book because what they have is Godzilla does sort of appear over a hill like he does in the shot, but as they kind of go into the crevice there, Godzilla ends up trying to claw at them to rip them out of the crevasse, which is an example again of Godzilla trying to overtly kill people. And this was something that they do storyboard out and referenced in the Godzilla the First 70 Years book from Ed Godziszewski and Steve Rifle. So if you're trying to like think of an analogous scene, if you remember from Son of Godzilla where Kumonga dips one of his claws into the cave to grab someone, that's kind of something they might have done had they had the budget to pull off something similar to that, which it's one of those things where it's like the optical illusion is not the best. And it would have been interesting to see like what they would have done in order to try and keep with the original intention behind this scene, because I think it would have been a really cool shot had they done this.
It stands out more the higher quality you watch the film in. While the effects and the monster action are great, the overall film is kind of dull. The two that witness the monsters go to Osaka where they meet Yamane of the previous film. It's not very often that a returning actor plays the same character in these movies. Yamane gives exposition to the characters and audience saying that this is...
And this is the Zimcast, sponsored by Save the Children. Donate now.
The major fear he stated at the end of the first film come true. Another Godzilla has in fact arrived. The original Godzilla is dead, gone, turned to bones. And these early Showas do have some continuity, so we can assume that Godzilla 2 here is basically the Godzilla for the remainder of these films. Since Serizawa died, the weapon used to kill Godzilla, the Oxygen Destroyer, cannot be recreated, pretty much leaving Japan SOL. There is a pattern here to the movie. We have moments of peace, monster attack, moments of peace, monster attack, monster attack. That's basically the same rhythm as the preceding film, except that this does not have that same sauce, mainly in that those layers of tragedy and foreboding are missing. That was Honda. That's why Honda was so important in directing the original film. If it weren't for him, he most likely wouldn't have had those heavy nuclear themes and bureaucratic concerns. If anyone else had done that film, it would have just been another generic B-monster movie. And that's kind of what Raids Again is. Seeing what...
I think it's not just the fact that, like, Honda was definitely very important in the direction that Godzilla 54 went, but as much as I like Godzilla Raids Again, I think that with Kayama, he was struggling to find a appropriate story for Godzilla Raids Again. And ultimately, with how similar the book and the film are, he does not have the same amount of existential dread that the original poses. And as a result, that is not something that you could put on Oda in his direction, because he'll even mention this later on in the video about how Raids Again is more somber than Gigantis is. So hypothetically, had Kayama developed a story that tackled and produced that same level of dread that the original did, that Oda would have had more material to pull from. The Russian Badger. I love Russian Badger. It's going faster than you thought. The only reason why it's going faster is because I'm the only one here. That's probably why. I guess as a kaiju creation question, one of the main reasons why 50 meters is the best size class for kaiju, you get the sheer enormity of the kaiju, along with them being small enough for direct human interaction. That's why I think like that's like a height where I stop in most cases for my own monsters. Although I prefer things that are a little bit smaller. Do I know the gaming rifts? Off the top of my head, no. But if I saw some clips and I had watched them before, I probably might recognize them.
What the original Godzilla could have been in an alternate timeline without Honda. Sure, you get the great visuals, absolutely, that's Tsuburaya right there. But the story, the film puts more focus on the characters. You really just don't care about them. The lead, Tsukioka, has about as much personality as a wooden plank. That's not to dock the actor either, because Koizumi is a great actor, which he has proven in and out of these kaiju flicks. But in this film, even Koizumi has lamented this character. He's just the stoic, handsome lead that kinda has this finding his courage plot, but it's not really conveyed in a super meaningful way. All the other side characters run circles around him in personality. I'd like to take a moment here to praise the score as well. Akira Ifukube, who scored the first film, did not return for this title. And the job went to Masaru Sato, who undeniably is the biggest highlight of this film. His music here is incredible, kind of outshines the movie itself, really. And following Ifukube's footsteps is not an easy task. And it's true that he would go on to make much better work, particularly working with Kurosawa films. But the score here is very good, and I'm sure the US cut wouldn't do anything to tamper with that. I like that God.
I think another thing to praise about Sato's score is the fact that if you did not know, you would assume that Ifukube scored this film as well. It has the same beats and the same enormity to scenes like Godzilla and Anguirus' battle that the original beats had as well. And what's interesting, or at least one thing I like, is when I'd asked someone, in this case Black Rooney, to do a cover for one of the Raids Again tracks, he assumed it was an Ifukube track, not realizing that Sato was the one who had composed this film. So the reason why, again, I think that that's important is because there is a level of similarity between these two, even though you don't have Honda present and there is some other, like, you don't have Honda and you don't have Ifukube present. But with Super Raya present, Kayama's story, and a few other people carrying over, like Nakajima and Tezuka, there still seems to be a level of visual and audio continuity between these two films.
Godzilla causing mayhem isn't enough of a concern. The possibility of Osaka being reduced to rubble, nothing but ashes, is not nearly as stressful as the possibility of losing their fishing cannery. And seriously, what a...
Build a website you...
All right, it's the Zimcast sponsored by Wix Kids. And we're going to pull back there because there's something I do want to make mention of. So...
Godzilla causing mayhem isn't enough of a concern. The possibility of Osaka being reduced to rubble, nothing but ashes, is not nearly as stressful as the possibility of losing their fishing cannery.
Yeah, the reason why it's stressful for them, the main characters, is because they, the main characters, rely on that fishing cannery, which is in Osaka, to help support their livelihood. So yes, human beings caring about a direct lifeline to their, like, literal living is going to be more important than the existential, oh my gosh, a city just got destroyed. Like, I don't know why people think this is weird, that, like, oh, you're really tied to something that you are emotionally invested in, whether it's your job or your house, versus, like, the entirety of something getting destroyed. Like, it is a tragedy if you witness, like, a building going down, and if there's people in that, like, that's awful and that's a tragedy, that's really bad. However, if, like, your house burns down, you are going to just naturally have a greater emotional investment in that, because, like, your house, your possessions, the memories that you had, all of that is tied to that location. So for people whose entire livelihood is staked on the fishing cannery, it is meaningful for them that location is destroyed. Like, it could have been the case that the fight between Godzilla and Anguirus doesn't destroy their cannery, so there is, like, a little bit of hope for them, because, hey, everything else got destroyed, but we are still able to build ourselves up because of one reason or another. Like, that's such, like, a weird nitpick to have.
Reduced to rubble, nothing but ashes, is not nearly as stressful as the possibility of losing their fishing cannery. And seriously, what a goofball of a movie this is. A prison transport crashes with convicts running on the loose, in which the police conveniently recruit Kobayashi and Tsukioka to chase them down, turning into this Three Stooges bit. For some reason...
The only reason why this is a Three Stooges, like, the comparison, because I didn't watch the audio commentary that Rifle was in, but I feel like he had made the same comparison about like the Three Stooges. I don't even think that's the case. The only reason why people think that, oh, it is the Three Stooges, because there's three characters there. Some of the acting is a little bit over the top, and how they're running around and they're moving. Some of them are falling as they're running, which can appear goofy to a viewer. So as a result, it's the Three Stooges, even though there is no overt comedy bits that these characters have. And if anything, they're played with not, like, sincerity or, like, seriousness. They're just convicts running away. Not to mention the fact that they mention, at least in the American film, that they were moving convicts out of the city as well, and along with the blackout. So yes, it makes sense for the convict scenes to appear. Is it convenient that their actions ultimately draw Godzilla back? Sure. I won't argue that, at least. Isn't it also sped up a little bit when they're running? I don't think so. Truly a great way to speed up Thanksgiving by roasting a potential grifter. I don't think he's a grifter, because he's done Godzilla videos in the past. Like, the thing with grifting, grifters, and all of that is you have to. I mentioned this before as well in the Zimcast that we did on Mike's Monsters and Kaiju Canucks videos, was that you have to, like, overtly prove that the people who are making the claims do not believe what it is they are saying, and that the only reason why they are making this content is because they are doing it for money. Like, at least in this guy's case, he's done Godzilla videos in the past. He's clearly interested in the franchise, but I just feel like a lot of what he says is just pulled from other sources, especially when it comes to his criticisms of the Gigantis cut of this film. Oh no, it's not a bad thing. It's like the term is used so loosely nowadays that at a certain point it just loses all meaning. And I think that goes for a lot of things, like slop. Even though I love using that word, slop is such a fun thing to say.
Their car struggles to keep up with a tanker. What? Leading to an explosion, which of course gets
Wait,
lost.
wait, what?
For some reason, their car struggles to keep up with a tanker. What? Leading to an explosion.
What's really funny is the fact that, like, as the tanker is moving away, you can see them, like, catching up to the tanker.
Up with a tanker. What? Leading to an explosion.
As well as, like, for example, you can't really, like, shoot out of the car that you're in because they're in a tanker, so it's just going to cause an explosion and just kill the convicts that way. And interestingly enough, they don't kill any of the convicts for at least the 3 that they restrain on the bridge when they first escape. So,
explosion, which of course gets the monster's attentions. And that is what's causing the destruction of Osaka. Okay. I mean, I get it. You don't want convicts running on the loose. You got a job to do, sure. But seriously, there are 2 giant monsters. Whatever. You got a job to do, I guess. The sequence is surprisingly well constructed on a technical level, but it just feels misplaced with the rest of the film. Godzilla finally has the big fight against Gigantis, battling in front of Osaka Castle, one of Japan's most famous and historically significant landmarks. A giant replica was built for them to destroy. It was actually made so strongly that they weren't able to properly obliterate it as they had planned. It's like Anguirus is a cat getting sprayed with a mist bottle. There are some great frames here of destruction. Oceans of flame. Super Raya, man. He knows his stuff. There was an incident during the filming of the monster fight where there were 3 cameras filming at high speeds, but one of them wasn't set to the proper speed. It was actually left on a slower setting. Super Raya was concerned, but still thought that the footage was usable, and you do see it when you watch the fight. You'll notice there's a bit of jankiness as the camera speeds are not in sync, but it kind of gives it a dynamic, almost slow-mo feel to certain moments of destruction. Yeah, Godzilla films aren't new.
Wait, a dynamic slow-mo feel? Even though the scenes are sped up and the monsters are clearly faster, how would that be dynamic and slow-mo? Unless you're trying to say that the scenes where the monsters are moving slowly is the dynamic and slow-mo scenes. One thing I will say is that due to this error, Super Rai would use similar techniques and keep one of those cameras at that speed for other scenes, like in Godzilla versus Mothra. And unlike, for example, that film where you get a few clips of Godzilla moving at this hyper exaggerated speed, as much as it is a notable Easter egg, I guess, or at least I would say error in Godzilla Raids Again, it doesn't work as well in Godzilla Raids Against Case, because when it comes to the original film, because it is a lot more quieter, it is a much slower film, it feels almost jarring to the tone that is being set by Godzilla Raids Again. But in the case of Gigantis the Fire Monster, where that film and its music and the addition of the sound is a more bombastic, more energetic film, the sped up actually does that edit more favors, because it does seem to be more consistent with at least this tone and the speed that tone is trying to convey with its music. I see 05. I saw 05 in chat. I didn't see him, but I saw those numbers. Common 05L is always in chat. I think the sped up footage looks cool sometimes because with reminds me of how animals like Komodo dragons fight, but does make them lose the sense of scale. The thing with that is, because of how sped up it is and for how long those sequences go, that's an issue that you have with, or at least I have, with the sped up camera. I think that, like, if they had them clash together and it was sped up like that and then they'd slow down, that would feel more natural. But in the case, it is just long takes of Godzilla and Anguirus going back and forth at that speed, and then you cut to them moving much slower again. That's where the immersion that you would have in this film and in those scenes, at least for me, loses it. And this is, again, coming from someone where it is one of my favorite Godzilla films, but I will acknowledge that it is hard for someone to get into this film for these reasons, compared to later show era fights where they either commit to slower fights or they commit fully to these fast-paced, pretty regular sped up battles between monsters.
usually very bloody or super graphic, but this killing blow on Angus is surprisingly violent and raw. Some of the ideas of the original are still carried over. This film holds the themes of the possibility of destruction after reconstruction, seeing characters doing their jobs, Japan flourishing in a sense post-war. It's been over a decade now, and life seems to have found some normalcy. But those fears and anxieties that a monstrosity can always hit at random and take away all of that progress. So much gets recycled in this film that they become tropes of the series. Military preparation, city evacuations. It really solidifies all of these moments into being tropes. There's a lot of really powerful shots in this film, and I really think that this movie would be held in a higher regard if it just stuck with those previous themes a little thicker, because there truly is a lot of potential. Instead, this film throws that away for a more lighthearted approach, which really takes away from the grittier potential. Moments that should be mournful are filled with cheer and laughter, which, yes.
Wait, how is this scene supposed to be like mournful? This is the scene right afterwards where Kobayashi finds some fish for them to find. So like, I don't understand how like this scene would be conveyed in a more tearful or mournful like setting, unless they're like, you could maybe do something where like Kobayashi has to be here because of the fact that like his part of the cannery was destroyed, so like he's up here and they're aware of it. But like, just the entire story, there are serious moments. I think that had there been more dialogue for the characters to espouse on those deeper, more like sorrowful bits, but contrast them more with the upbeat bits, I think that like you'd have a stronger story. But like choosing this like visually as an example, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not for the editor here, but like this is not a scene that you could really do as like tearful or mournful, at least in the context of the story.
It can be seen as it's good to be optimistic in the aftermath of disaster because you still got your life and your friends, I guess. Instead of getting an inspiring rebuilding sequence, the protagonists go take a vacation in Hokkaido.
Well, they're not taking a vacation. They're moving their operations up to Hokkaido. Like that, these are still people who are working with the company. You literally just had a scene that's showing Kobayashi working. Like they're at a party and they're celebrating, but like they're not just there on vacation because they want to be.
Oh, there's Godzilla again. In the final act of the film, is revealed that Kobayashi apparently harbored secret feelings for Hidemi, his best friend's girl. And I guess that they went to school together. Otherwise, it'd be really creepy that the photo he has here is her school photo. Well, now we know he's gonna die. Wait a minute. Love triangle. Sacrifice. Oh, God damn it. This is literally how the first movie ended. They just did the same thing over again. Except this time, Kobayashi is the only character in this movie that has any sort of personality, so his death you do care about and feel a little bummed out. We never really got a chance to get attached to this character, not until the very end. Also, he didn't really sacrifice himself, he just kind of got blasted by Godzilla. I mean, yeah, it sucks. That doesn't compare to Sarasawa's sacrifice. That still shakes me to my core.
What's interesting is that I will actually reference the book here, is that in the book, they don't explicitly state that Hidemi is the character, or at least the person that Kobayashi has feelings for, because we'll go to, for anyone who does have the book, it's going to be page 175, and it's the last paragraph. It says, "It was another small photograph. Without thinking anything about it, she picked it up. Much to her surprise, the photo showed a young woman wearing her hair in two ponytails on either side of her head. Her eyes were bright and showed a sweetness as she smiled. A realization struck her. Oh my, this must be the girl he was talking about." Overhead, she could hear the roar of Kobayashi's engine as he flew away. So I think probably in this case, Murata probably decided to ape the choice that Honda did, because Honda is the one who changes Ogata's relationship with Sarazawa, as well as Shinkichi, whose role is essentially that of Ogata from the film, to have this love triangle between the two. So it seems that Murata aped that bit from Honda, and ultimately that's why you get that similarity between the films, whereas in the book, it's just another girl that Kobayashi likes, and there's no direct relation to Hidemi, because you can tell for a fact it's not Hidemi, because she says, oh my, this must be the girl he was talking about, so saying, or at least the pros being like, it was her, or something like that. There's nothing that indicates that Hidemi is the character that Kobayashi was pining for in the book. Happy Thanksgiving. What's up, Pena? Sorry, I'm late for the chat. Oh, don't worry, Martin. No, I appreciate everyone being in and just listening to my ramblings. And this has already been 44 minutes, which means we have already passed the length of this video, which I adore. I always like the fact that anytime I am reacting and responding to these videos, I can almost always ensure that I'm getting like close to double the length of these videos. Didn't Kobayashi try to lead Godzilla back to the island so they could keep him there? Essentially, yeah.
Kobayashi was basically sidelined the whole movie up until the final act, and there's just not really enough time for the audience to care. Of course, you could say, it's just a monster movie. So what?
Let's unpack holiday decor.
Let's unpack. So it's gonna be the Zimcast, sponsored by Amazon, guys. Don't you know? Like, you know, I could really dig living in a house like this if I had Jenner kind of money. As well as Zimcast, sponsored by Fortnite Zero Hour. And, you know, it's technically appropriate because we got Godzilla. You know, it's the evolved Godzilla, like the totally awesome Godzilla. And the Kongs. Don't you know? We got King Kongs in Star Wars, guys. And Homer.
Films can still have exciting and memorable human stories. They may be completely absurd, but they're still entertaining and usually have some purpose behind them. Godzilla was supposed to be walking here, but the toy that they used for this shot...
Also, just a bit of contradiction here because we'll just go back.
So what? So what? Kaiju films can still have exciting and memorable human stories. They may be completely absurd, but they're still entertaining and usually have some purpose behind them. Godzilla was supposed...
So, yeah, in this case, yeah, Kobayashi's death does have a purpose behind it, so therefore, I guess you're kind of weakening your own point, but to each their own, I guess.
Be walking here, but the toy that they used for this shot wasn't moving, so he's just static. Oh boy. The Big G is frozen in ice until being woken up for his screen time with King Kong. Interestingly enough, this is one of those rare times where the military or humans actually beat Godzilla in a clever way that doesn't feel forced or completely out of the realm of possibility. They use the environment around him to stop the Big G. I always find those memes to be especially exciting. I think Raids Again is more of a mixed bag than an outright bad film. It's not great by any means. Its story and characters are really boring, although they do get moments to shine, but not nearly enough. There's still immense charm here as a B-movie with splendid effects, and personally, I do like cheesy sci-fi films with big critters and all the familiar tropes. So it does work for me on that level. As a Godzilla title, it doesn't really stand out properly as a film the King really should. I wouldn't say you should skip this one. It's definitely worth watching at least once. I mean, come on. It's the last film in glorious black and white for Godzilla. It's the first monster fight. And Tsuburaya shows a lot of improvement instead of regressions or cop-outs as one would expect from a sequel made so hurriedly and cheaply. It may be tough to see, but there is a surprising amount of soul still in this movie. According to Ishiro Honda himself, the reception of Raids Again in Japan was actually decently positive, and some more so than the original film. I find that very hard to believe, personally, but looking back on it now, hey, Godzilla would go on to fight a lot of different kaiju after this film. And it certainly became not just a franchise, but the largest.
I think that it's hard to believe because we hold 54 in such high regard that it's crazy to think that a film that on a technical level and on a story level is inferior could be received better. And I think that it is due to the fact that we are aware that certain people found the comments on the atomic bombs to be distasteful for Godzilla, and considering the fact that it was a like sci-fi film, that's another reason why people did not take to it kindly. I think that in this case, because the fact that you're able to take a character like Godzilla and you're into those people, I guess, put it where it properly deserves being a B movie monster movie, it probably was like more at least palatable to those people. And along with the fact that Godzilla had become popular at this point, Kayama comments on this in the book, and that kids were more interested in watching Godzilla, it meant that there was now a draw for Godzilla. So you have the first film that's drawing everyone in, and then you have the second one that now has an established group of people interested in this character who are now more readily willing to see it. Favorite dinosaur movie is either Disney's Dinosaur or Speckles the Tarbosaurus, if Jurassic isn't allowed. I've never seen Speckles the Tarbosaurus in full. Hello. Why did USJD? I've never seen you in before either. So in this case, hello, welcome. What is my favorite dinosaur movie that's not Godzilla, King Kong, or Jurassic Park related, if it be live action or animated? Probably the original Lost World would probably be one of my favorites, followed by T-Rex Back to the Cretaceous, which was I know it was in like these like IMAX theaters in several different museums. That was a really fun one. Primal, but I wouldn't even call Primal like a dinosaur movie or show. And you said movies too, so I'd probably say the original Lost World. I love the effects on this. Speckles is certainly, it is something. Speckles is something.
Film franchise in terms of installments. And while Godzilla was on ice, even more importantly, Toho would be spending that time to bring about a whole new wave of exciting kaiju. If you recall, when Godzilla first arrived in the US,
And since he is talking about other kaiju, so between Godzilla Raids Again and King Kong versus Godzilla, you have, for example, and I'm just including every kind of sci-fi kaiju kaijin type of film. You have the H-Man, which is from 1958. But first, you have Half Human from 1955, so the same year as Godzilla Raids Again. Rodan from 1956, the Mysterians from 1957, the H-Man, like I said, from 58, Varan from 58, the Human Vapor from 1960, Mothra from 1961, and Gorath from 1962. And then following that, you have King Kong versus Godzilla. So I include Gorath in there because Gorath had released before King Kong versus Godzilla did.
it was with the re-edited version instead of a simple dub. They threw in American actor Raymond Burr to basically narrate stuff for the English-speaking audience. It was a clever and successful way to bring the Big G over to the West, even if some of those heavy themes were censored. And if you thought that that was bad, it's about to get way worse. The original idea for this was to make a whole new film using only the special effects of Raids Again. That would have been called The Volcano Monsters. It fell under due to budgeting, but it was really close to reality. I mean, they even had the costumes sent from Toho. This was almost real. But since it did fall under, the producers decided to simply just dub the film. The dub script is...
So we've got the Zimcast sponsored by Facebook this time. And in this case, how, like, I want, as well as Zimcast sponsored by Mattress Firm, I want him to tangibly explain why him following the lip movements of the original actor by saying hey there, because essentially the actor is still saying hey, but in this case, is it better to try to copy the line one for one, or is it better to try to follow the lip movements? Because that is something you're always going to run into when it comes to dubbing things over, because you're going to have to either use other words to get as close to approximation as you can to the original tense behind the lines, but also follow the lip movement so it looks natural. I'm of the opinion personally that you follow the intent behind a scene as much as possible without injecting like your own personal beliefs into it, so that you not only get across the intent behind a scene, but you're able to follow the lip movements so that the audience member isn't distracted by what is being said, not matching the actual lip movements of the actors. That is my personal philosophy, but we'll get into that as we go on with his criticisms. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, see, so like we'll just do it one more time. And actually we'll stop it. Let's go through it on its own. And what I want to, I'll slow down the shots too. Because so he's going, hey, and then right there he stops and then opens his mouth again. So that's like a problem you're always going to run into when it comes to dubbing a film, is those small issues. And again, is it better to have the line be as close to the original but not match the lip movements, or follow the lip movements and some things may or may not be lost in translation?
It's rough. It's not a direct translation. It's barely even a loose one, really. It's just strange. It's very strange.
What's the matter, my dear?
Kobayashi's conked out.
But don't
So we'll stop sharing this right here, because what is necessarily wrong with her saying Kobayashi's conked out? Let me share another screen right here. So conked out, it's an informal term that means a machine has stopped working, suddenly a person's fallen asleep, or a person's become exhausted and collapse. Example, an old car conked out halfway up the hill. So talking about this not being a direct translation, in the original film, she just says something's happened to Kobayashi, which is why he's asking what's happening. But in the dub, she explicitly states that his plane conked out. But since, like, at least when it comes to the original verse is the re-edit, Hidemi and Hidemi's like the girl who works beside her, they know for a fact that Kobayashi's saying that he's having engine trouble. So therefore saying conked out relays information easier, and as a result, it still makes sense rather than her going to her father and saying something's happened to Kobayashi, because both of those get the same meaning behind them. And even if it's not a direct translation, there's nothing wrong with that phrasing. Like, that slang isn't even old in comparison to something like the banana oil line. But that's neither here nor there. We're going to keep going because some of the examples that he starts to bring up are just even worse.
Don't worry, we'll get to that. First off, let's talk about the opening of the film. It takes almost 3 minutes, which is a lot for these types of movies, before we actually see footage of Raids Again. The entire intro is something completely made up for this version. It is an awfully generic montage of nuclear weapon and missile testing, cheesy music, and the narration that just has nothing really to do with the movie at all. It's just
well, actually, I would argue that in a way it does help it helps the film. If anything, it makes those themes stronger, because the shot of Baker right there, as well as the rocket test, all of that is them talking about the continued expansion of nuclear weapons and nuclear rockets. And they state that even as people like move out of space and there's new discoveries being found, that there's still like dangers to be found due to the continued usage of nuclear weapons. And they even explicitly state that when you get to the scene about Anguirus. So that does have something to do with the film and Godzilla as a whole. So saying it has nothing to do with Godzilla at all is, I would say, like, it's being very unkind to the edit. Is it unnecessary? Arguably, sure. But to say it has nothing to do with the film or the themes of the film is, I'd say, lazy. Not to mention the fact that when it comes to this shot, it's really interesting how you would see this shot used multiple times across other Godzilla films, but that's just neither here nor there. God, did you see my question? Let's see. Zim, what is your favorite Godzilla movie from each era? Showa, Gojira, or Megalon, Heisei, Mechagodzilla 2, Final Wars for Millennium, Reiwa -1, Monster vs. Kotum. I'd say Showa is 54. Heisei is a tie between 84 and Biollante. Millennium is 2000. Reiwa's -1. Monsterverse is probably 2014 or Kotum. But
version. It is an awfully generic montage of nuclear weapons.
And speaking to generic, it's generic because every other like film followed these trends later on. Like, I would be interesting to see how many films before Gigantis had this kind of montage to it.
Weapon and missile testing, cheesy music, and the narration that just has nothing really to do with the movie at all. It's just playing off of the whole atomic era cliche of films with the US's anxieties of nuclear weaponry that all the big monster films use. Remember when Godzilla was...
Well, Tarantula, I guess I can't use Tarantula because I said it wasn't that big of a film. We did the Doctor Who stream, but yeah, like Tarantula doesn't really mention it. I don't think It Came From Beneath the Sea doesn't either. It's really only them and The Beast in 20,000 Fathoms. King Kong's from 33, so it's not really a contemporary of those other films. Neither really does 20 Million Miles to Earth. Giant Mantis, yeah, that does. So it's like it's a mixed bag. It's not something all the big monster films did.
Was a brilliant symbolic message for humanity's hubris. Now let's just spell this out for you and waste 3 minutes of your life, which...
Even though in Godzilla 54, they directly state that Godzilla is the product of nuclear testing, and there's a woman who explicitly talks about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like, both films will explicitly talk about these themes. It's just because this is an American edit, and because America nuked Japan, people will like to harp on like American edits or them doing this rather than the Japanese films, which do the same thing.
By the way, the US cut is already shorter than the Japanese film. Even worse, it then transitions to a not very complimentary look at the Japanese people. We have the sequence of farming footage of the oh-so-little quaint nation of hard workers. The sequence describes Japan as being almost backwards comparatively to the bustling larger nations of the world. The general American audience had this offensive perspective, and mind you, many of them were still scorning post-war too, as if it wasn't bad.
So this is an outright lie. Like, I'm either going to say you didn't watch the film or the edit and like take it seriously, or you're just a liar. I'm sorry. So now I can get into the source list. Let's do this. So he does not say, the film never states that Japan as a whole is full of like rice farmers or a quaint little village. Nothing of the sort. It never does this. What they do state, however, is that Kaio, where the Kaio fishing industry, like the Kaio cannery, is a quaint, like small town that is primarily focused on fishing. And that's what they do. I wish I could pull up like Gigantis and like show that scene without like probably getting copyrighted. That'd be my big concern. But yeah, no, I'd say like he's an outright liar in this scene. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition over into the source list here. So for context, Kaio is this district here on this part of Japan, which is essentially like besides this right here, it's essentially its own little island off of Japan itself. So Kaio is going to be about here. Osaka is here. So that means that like the Kaio fishing industry is supported by their cannery here in Osaka. But they're probably either flying out of Osaka proper or they're flying out of here. And what's even funnier about this is if you look at like resources talking about Kaio itself, just go to economy. Kaio has a mixed economy of agriculture and commercial fishing. So it's not even unflattering. It is literally just the reality of this area of Japan. And if we go here, this is, let me just tab over here. As it loads, and we'll translate it. This is literally them just talking about the area. And we go to industry and labor, agriculture and livestock, forestry, fishery, labor and employment. Like it's not even a idea that like, oh, look at the Japanese. No, they're talking about a specific area in Japan that just so happens to be focused around fishing. The only reason, like, so when I'd been watching the films, I was taking notes. I wasn't sure how they spelled Kaio, and when I put it in, I put it as Kaio, and I got an entirely different region of Japan, which was like Kyoto, which was sometimes referred to as like Kaio. And I was like, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And it's only until I then watched Raids again where they actually spell out Kaio as this, where I realized, oh, they're referring to this part of Kaio, and that's where you get this connection here. And again, they are literally talking about the fact that it is a coastal town, a small town, mind you. Like, this is going to be relevant for later as well. But looking at Kaio's population, that is not big. Like, certain, like, towns or cities in, like, the south of the United States are still larger than Kaio's population is. So this is a relatively small town that is supported mostly by agriculture and fishing. That is not offensive. That is just the reality. And if anything, it contextualizes more of what's going on. And it's like, oh, like why would they care about their cannery being destroyed? At least in Gigantis, they're saying like, wow, this small town is supported by this fishery. Their like main source of canning fish, part of the biggest like part of their export is just destroyed. This is going to hit very hard for them. So like again, I'm not sure if he just didn't watch the film right when he was making this, or he chose to be offended, or he's just lying. At this point, I don't know. Like I assume, at least being as good faith as possible, that he's not lying. He's just misremembering. But no, they literally specifically talk about Kaio and not Japan as a whole. Like it's upsetting because it's like, no, I think that in this case, you are just trying to like find something to be upset about when it comes to Americans and like them butchering Godzilla.
Bad enough that producers already wanted to make a whole new movie and just remove Japan's significance. They opted to fabricate an unnecessary sequence to insult them. Well, it's as if the American
prove it. Like, I'm sorry. Please, like, fucking prove it. It's ridiculous. It's like the worst you could arguably say about them trying to remove Japan's significance from the film is how Rifle talks about the film here in the 70-year history. Let me find it. It's going to be on page 52 for anyone who has it. And it's like Ib Melkor. I don't even think that's how you say his name, but he's one of the guys who wrote the Volcano Monsters, and he says like, let's go right here. The idea was that we didn't want anyone to know this was a Japanese film, so we eliminated the entire Japanese story and cast. So at least in this case, like, I'm not sure necessarily where that quote is being pulled from. And if that were the case, okay, like someone raised in Denmark and then like lived in the US, served in the US, etc., is saying that. Like, that's not really a indictment against like Americans as a whole or the movie industry, especially considering the fact that Schreidman himself, who oversaw the name change, would go on to later on regret that decision to change the name to Gigantis, because the original like reason was to make it sell better and hope that it didn't get the same fatigue that people had for sequels in the US. And not to mention that Schreidman would go on to not produce, but like help bring over more Japanese products and like films of this nature. So the idea that like, oh, it's just because of racism is completely fabricated and ridiculous. Also, it's insulting to be a farmer. It's like they're depicted as poor, just workers. Yeah, no, they're not depicted as like poor. Like, it's the same thing as like if I went and talked about like a town in like the middle of nowhere up north or like down south and be like, oh yeah, it's mostly just farming out here, little to do. It's like, if I'm watching this, my first thought isn't, oh my gosh, look at the Japanese and their inability to like do anything modern. My first thought is, oh, it's like a quaint small town. So it's like people in a small town dealing with a huge problem. Something similar to like the giant Gila monster or the blob, something like that. It's like you're trying to be offended at this point. Racism is about people hating another person for their skin color and some elements of their culture for invalid reasons, not making goofy characters based on specific archetypes of a specific area. But then here's the thing, is it's not even a specific archetype. That is literally just the reality of that region. And they're not even like being like, I would want him to provide a specific sentence or quote from the film that presents them in a way that shows them to be lesser, especially because he just contradicts himself a few minutes later.
Producers were getting off on their superiority boners, talking down to the little old underdeveloped Japan.
They do not complain, for they have learned that hard work makes for happiness.
The film showed.
Yeah, that's like the same thing as like you saying that to someone in like Nebraska or something. Like, I'm sorry, that's not something to be ashamed of or to look down on. Like, what?
Was Osaka later, and it's honestly modern.
So, you know what's really funny is that like he makes the allusion to racism here when there's quite literally an advertisement in Japan that's showing a character that's like similar to a menstrual show. Like, I'm not really sure the context of this advertisement here. Is it supposed to actually be a black person? Is it supposed to be blackface? Is it like because it's like a caricature of a person that this is literally supposed to be a black person? But like, obviously with the lips and stuff being lit up, that's something that you would see with minstrel shows, blackface, things of that nature. But like, you go from, oh, they're having such a superiority boner over like diminishing the Japanese, and then just not comment on this, which is in the original film, mind you. Look at these Japanese Amish. Hey, I got a lot of respect for the Amish. Good on them. No, I did not. Because I having to go back and forth with all the source lists. If you want me from like, unless I see it right away, if you want me to see something and it's gone a little further up the chat, just like spot like a super chat, because then I will always be able to see it, because super chats will always pop up in a different location to me compared to just regular chats. So if like it's something like really important you want me to look at, super chats are always gonna be the best way, unfortunately. A picture is too low quality for me to read what that says. It's like when Ben Shapiro said that Kents lacked dignity and grace because they were farmers, when that was never the intention. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
Clubbing and all that. Can't believe Toho wasn't steaming over this. The title was also changed. Instead of Volcano Monsters, it was Gigantis the Fire Monster. Although the excuse was that they didn't want to call it Godzilla because Godzilla died in the first one, but the movie explains that this is a second.
They never say that. They say they didn't want to confuse with Godzilla because they wanted it to be a sequel. And again, even looking at Toho, they never made another Godzilla film until 1962. They had a dozen other like films, not like a literal dozen, but like close to that when it came to other sci-fi kaiju films. So like the idea that like, oh, it's weird for the Americans to do this. Japan didn't even touch Godzilla until much, much later because they understood the merit of like new and exciting things for their audience.
In Godzilla, not in the English version. He's the Gigantosaurus.
That's also like either he misremembered or it's a straight up lie because they never call him the Gigantosaurus. They do say Ankylosaurus, killer of the living, but they never say Gigantosaurus.
Who just happens to look identical to Godzilla. And interestingly enough, to my knowledge, only the VHS release has the original Gigantis title card, because the DVD release from Toho Master Collection actually changed it to Raids Again. And to add further insult, they couldn't even bother to spell the Japanese cast and crew's names correctly. And the narration.
I'm not even sure about the case with the cast and crew's names being different.
Change it to
Let me
Raids
pause
Again.
on it.
And to add further insult, they couldn't even bother to...
So in those cases, I'm not sure if it's like them just failing at the localization of it with the names, or they were just like outright racist, which I doubt is the case. It's like, oh yeah, let's spell these Japanese characters' names wrong because racism. But like one example I can think of to be as charitable as possible to this is that when you're romanizing Japanese words over to English, you oftentimes do not get it one for one. For kaiju names, two that come to mind are Volga and Varen. Sometimes, and you can also check this too if you guys have like Twitter, for example. Certain cases, if a Japanese person on Twitter has Varen and they write it out or Volga, and then you use an auto translator, it doesn't come up as Varen or Volga. Sometimes it comes up as Bolga or Baron. So Baran or Bolga. And another example of that is, for example, the Odo Island Godzilla. They don't use the normal katakana for Godzilla's name. They use 3 different kanji, which is why when people try to auto-translate it, it doesn't come up as Godzilla. It comes up as like Wurira or Wujira, but not Godzilla. So I think this is just an example of when people are translating something over, there is going to be issues like that. Like translation is not a perfect science. Yeah, when putting Japanese words in Romaji, it's never one-on-one. This is like the most basic one-on-one stuff they're teaching when learning Japanese. Exactly. So like, why attribute quote-unquote racism to it?
To spell the Japanese cast and crew's names correctly. And the narration.
So you think you know Wix?
Zimcast, sponsored by Wix, kids. Get your Wix for features, shaped videos, masks, something, blah, blah.
As I looked desperately for a sign of my friend Kobayashi's plane, I sped through a bank of clouds which made my vision difficult and momentarily impossible.
This movie never shuts up. Tsukioka is dubbed by Key Luke, the original Kato and Green Hornet. For the dubbing of this film, he has a very... He has an accent.
Conflict of wills, striving for supremacy over the other one. Now, from that, we are going to create comedy. You see, that is our desire to do in this new series. Comedy lasts for everybody, for the entire family, young and old.
Some of them gathered in the streets. Others looked toward the heavens for help and uttered silent prayers. Others listened at home.
What, too broad or not broad enough? Because I've got some incredibly racist buck teeth in my pocket.
I guess we'll count that. We'll count Robo. Bring Roger to the count as well. But let's see if that's quote-unquote racist. He does mention Key Luke's original voice. And not to mention the fact that like that's him when he's older. I'm not sure. I've never seen like a younger Key Luke than what we see in like things like the Green Hornet, for example. But I was able to find some of Key Luke like in the Green Hornet. So we'll look at like how he sounds in the Green Hornet by comparison to how he sounds in Gigantis the Fire Monster. And let's see which we could probably consider to be more racist. So there he is right there.
That chemical has a powerful kick. Do you think the motor will stand it?
It's the strongest motor ever built and the fastest.
Thanks to your scientific knowledge.
I am satisfactory as a valet, too.
Perfectly. It was a lucky day for me when I rescued you from that native in Singapore.
He tried to kill me because I am a Korean. You shall never be sorry you saved my life.
So, like, I like when he says rife, like, I think in this case you could tell he's probably putting on an accent right here. But like, he never in Gigantis the Fire Monster, I never remember hearing him like eat his R's in the Gigantis to where an L is sounding like an R. Like, let's go back to even the clip that he shows. So, because I know, like, he says silent prayer, so that has an L in it. Let's pull back just a tiny bit more.
Some of them gathered in the streets. Others looked toward the heavens for help and uttered silent prayers. Others.
Yeah, he says silent prayer. He never says silent prayers. Like, I'm very curious because I'm not entirely familiar with Key Luke's entire filmography, and I'm not even sure, for example, like he either grew up with an accent or he grew out of an accent, and or something to the effect of like he never had an accent, but he could put on an accent from like observing other people. But like this entire idea that, oh, he's explicitly putting on an accent in Gigantis the Fire Monster, but then reference, oh yeah, he was like he was Kate on the Green Hornet, and then don't show clips of the Green Hornet when he is explicitly putting on a heavier accent is crazy work to me. Crazy. Oh, Sea Monsters in the chat. Is Cheryl Hondage agree with the homosexual politics in Godzilla vs. Megalon? That's the real question. I don't even know what that's referencing, but I don't even want to know. I do not want to know at all. Let's pull us back here.
Listen at home.
What, too broad or not broad enough? Because I've got some incredibly racist buck teeth in my pocket.
The narration is the most frustrating aspect of this localization, but you know, it makes a good point. The original film is quiet, maybe more so than other kaiju films, and that just goes to show the difference of countries here. Japan gave us a more contemplative approach, one where the audience has to do a little bit of work for themselves watching it and absorbing the filmmaking. The American version has this jackass narration explaining literally every detail on screen to the most insulting level, as if to say, hey viewer, you're a real dumbass, aren't you, huh? Well, you stupid little idiot, you know what that is? That's an airplane. That's water. There's fish in water. Do you know that? You can get fish in the water. I'm not even exaggerating. The narration walks your hand through the most basic levels of comprehension. It's one step away from reminding viewers how to breathe. Media literacy is a real tough thing.
Oh, he said the word. He said the word. He said media literacy. Media literacy, kids.
These days, but it's not so hard to believe when our boomers were growing up with this.
We dashed out of our hiding place through the rocky cavern as the monsters still fought underwater, creating a spout of bubbling foam.
Why is it that these film producers feel that their viewers are so damn moronic that they need this? The dialogue.
Because opening title crawls, narrations, and things of that nature are just a convention of films from that time. To demonstrate this, we're going to pull a bit of a narration from something else Key Luke was also a part of. It's called Phantom of Chinatown. Also, just a fun little fact, Key Luke is, I believe, Chinese, although Kato is Korean in the Green Hornet, but then he ends up voicing Tsukioka, who is a Japanese man. But that's neither here nor there. So at the beginning of the Phantom of Chinatown, we have what is a more natural narration that we can show here.
Whose patience, sympathy, and understanding more than anyone else made our expedition possible. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Norman Wilkes, the president of Southern University. The camel is, like most patient souls, more than a little stubborn, and the packing developed into an endurance contest between the beasts and the attendants. Too bad this young man wasn't a few years older. I'm sure he could have solved the entire problem.
So, like, the reason why I wanted to bring up this is, one, because Key Luke's in it. Two, there's the narration. But three, it's an example of where this is a more natural example of how to bring up narration and exposition. Here, because there is less context behind these shots to not only the audience, but also the people present, it makes sense that we'd have a person stating what we are seeing on screen and therefore providing the extra context. Like, for example, even though, like, people probably wouldn't say it's analogous, the idea that Star Wars has that, like, opening crawl is a silent form of narration. So, no, like American films, serials, especially from that time, would have these kinds of narrations, and it was a trope of the genre. So the idea that, like, oh, media literacy is dead, or like, why would they have that? Because it is a trope and therefore a convention of the genre. You stupid fuck. But let's keep moving.
This movie is nonsensical, a lot of it due to the lip syncing, but just in general, I don't think the writers really cared much.
This is bad. This is bad.
So, as they say, when he says this is bad, the original line is them saying our fear is correct. It is our worst fear of all, which is essentially saying the exact same thing, but just with different words. And again, what I just said is a translation. So for all I know, the actual Japanese spoken could mean the same thing as saying this is bad, but when we have the Godzilla Raids Again subtitles, they changed it in order to not sound as repetitive.
Oh, a new book came out and we learned so much. And it is called Anguillosaurus, Killer of the Living. Anguillosaurus. True.
Again, I'm not sure why this is a criticism, because we can also look at what they talk about in the book as well. So you're going to be going to the Professor Yamane chapter, and I will find my place in just a moment. There it is. Okay. We're going to go to page 126. And he says, that's right. Hydrogen bomb testing awakened not just Godzilla, but also this other monster too, Ankylosaurus. And then Ankylosaurus question mark. That's right, Ankylosaurus. That sounds just as repetitive reading it to saying this is bad. This is bad. So that's not even like an example of the dubbers not, or the writers not caring. It's just an example of like doing what you can with what you had with the film.
Gentlemen, who is there among us who knows the way to destroy Gigantis? There is no way.
Hey,
it's Zimcast, sponsored by Network Guide, kids. And let's actually just see if we can just go to that in the book too. So that you're literally just going to go over to the next page. It's going to be page 127. You're going to be around halfway through that page, and it says, the professor gave a quick nod of acknowledgement and stood up again. Just now you asked about what we can do to combat Godzilla. That's essentially the same. The sentiment is carried over from Gigantis to Godzilla Raids Again. Unfortunately, there isn't a single thing we can do. We can't prevent Godzilla from coming again. That's essentially the same thing as there's like, who is there among us who knows the way to destroy Gigantis? If anything, that scene and that line in the English dub works better than it does in the Japanese, because it's posited as a question to the people assembled, and he is the only person who's actually witnessed a giant monster attack before, and it's almost rhetorical because he says there's none that I happen to know of, not one. And considering how like Shimura's acting already is, it adds to the somber note that we have in the scene, because not every point in Gigantis is just bombastic all the time. This is a quieter moment, and I think that how it is arranged here in the dub does do like the same thing, if not better than the original.
For God's sake, most of the movie they mix up Godzilla and Anguirus, interchanging their names sentences apart.
No, they don't. That is a lie.
Sentences apart. We then get a dinosaur lesson using footage from other movies, eventually the clips from the original film. You know, the one that this movie has no connection to. No.
Hey, fucker. You know, if they're confusing the monsters' sentences apart, then it'd be pretty fucking easy to go and show that clip. But I do know probably what that's a reference to, and it's actually in two cases. So in the classic media, like Master Collection that we both have, him and I, they talk about how Gigantis, it is the Gigantis monster of the Anguirus family. What that means is that for the family, or at least that larger grouping, is the Anguirus family, and then you have the species, which is Gigantis. That's like the same thing as like Tyrannosaurid being the group name, and therefore you have a specific species or creature from that grouping. So it'd be like saying the Tarbosaur of the Tyrannosaur family if hypothetically there was a film about a T-Rex and a Tarbosaur fighting. But another thing too is the thing that mixes up people is that because Anguirus is the family name, when you get to them showing off the original, Yamane says the result is the first Anguirus. So, like, even if you're looking at, and again, if we replace this, a Tarbosaur and a Tyrannosaur, and if you said Tyrannosaurid or Tyrannosaur is the family name and is a Tarbosaur member of the Tyrannosaur family, and you said the result was the first Tyrannosaur, you would still be correct in your assertion because you're referring to the creature by its family name. And then he literally says, here is a Gigantis member of the Anguirus family. The problem with the dubbing is the fact that since they want to distinguish Gigantis from Godzilla, but they also have Anguirus and Godzilla, or Anguirus and Gigantis be of the same grouping of creature, that's where the confusion comes into play. They never once confuse Anguirus for Gigantis. That's something that Rifle, I think, gets wrong in his audio commentary, but also he gets wrong here because a lot of the criticisms that he's positing are what Rifle comments on in the audio commentary. So, like, if I just wanted a more informed criticism of Godzilla Raids Again, I would just listen to the audio commentary that he's pulling this information from.
No, not at all. It took 3 years for this to release after King of the Monsters in 1956. So avid moviegoer.
Yeah. The reason why it took so long is because, of course, they were trying to make an entirely new film. But let's also not forget about the fact that even though it's been like not that long since the other film had released, there are still other things coming out. So like the idea that, oh, we're definitely going to remember this other film that we watched and just associate the two is not always going to be the case. The issue against my point here would be that we literally see clips from Godzilla King of the Monsters. So there is that.
Or enjoyers of monster films would most certainly recognize what's going on here and think, oh, wait a moment.
Didn't you finally manage to destroy him? With the oxygen destroyer. It destroyed the oxygen while the monster was underwater and asphyxiated him.
They froze the frame for the other guy to talk over with that expression. Oh, really? The oxygen destroyer destroys oxygen. I had no idea. Perhaps the most infamous moment of this entire dub is the banana oil scene.
Banana oil.
Even when this movie came out, that expression was outdated. It basically is an old expression equivalent to saying BS. I think banana oil was the last straw for viewers back in the 50s.
Can you prove it? But yeah, this is another example of when it comes to dubbing, do you dub based on the lip movements or do you dub based on the actual intent? Because again, pulling from what Rifle says, at least, what Tsukika says is like baka or bakara, which like that is like saying dummy or like ridiculous or nonsense or flattery in this case. Like that's what banana could mean, where it's like either nonsense or flattery. But like in that case, is it better to try to find a word or a phrase that matches the lip sync as well as is also appropriate? Because I mean, you could literally just like say bullshit and you're probably getting a pretty similar like lip movement there, but that's not going to fly in a film like this. They even wanted to do Blade Runner, and that's a comment was in the 80s. It was fading, and it's trash. But to be frank, the G-dubs, including King Kong vs. Godzilla, are hard at AF. Yeah, like, I am of the opinion it is better to, like, my opinion on dubs is I think dubs are important because not everyone is going to want to watch a film and have to always be reading what the characters are saying. Sometimes you just want to passively and casually watch a film. There's nothing wrong with casually watching a film. And I don't think that it like people ought to always watch something in its original language. I don't think that people outside of America or people who don't speak English ought to always watch American films in English. If there's a way to localize something in that person's language and they are able to view it in their own language, then I think they ought to do that. However, if they ought to analyze films and pick them apart and criticize them, then they ought to watch them in their original language so that the intents behind these scenes and what is being said in them is not muddled by a translation. And like that's one thing like I always have issues when it comes to translations is that sometimes the translator doesn't care and will just put whatever they want into a scene. Like the most infamous examples, and I'm going to bring it up, is the Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid dubbing. And for these scenes, so we're going to like stop them because I know I'm probably getting my nuts chopped off for showing these scenes. But let's do it right here. So let's start from the beginning. And is this on one time speed? Yep.
What are you wearing that for? Oh, those pesky patriarchal societal demands were getting on my nerves. So I changed clothes. Give it a week, they'll be begging you to change back.
So that's that scene right there. And then let's see what the original scene says. So it's about quote unquote pesky, like political bullshit. That's what they're talking about in the dub of that scene. Now, let's see what the actual like sub says.
何ですかその格好。いつも言われるから露出度を抑えたんだ。どうかな次は体を変えるといいですよ。
So, literally, it like that whole sequence is very different because the intents behind that of like people like giving her shit or saying something to her is very different from patriarchal bullshit. Why is and why? Yeah, because it's an easy point. Again, what's it called? It's a common 05L as always. I am thankful always for the repeated, expected, usual, ever giving 05L. So 05L in chat, guys. 05L in chat. Oh, 05L.
You gnome fuck!
There we go. Okay. Back to what else we were doing.
That's when they either dip or just mentally checked out. It really is impressive how much stock footage this film shoved in, and still is shorter than the original. And you can instantly tell when it swaps from stock footage with the inconsistency in quality. They even threw in stock footage of, I guess, US clubs. Although, interestingly enough, they didn't dub over the music at least, so that's a pro. Moments of silent anxiety, the planes flying overhead with the people praying that the monsters will not attack their homes, is replaced with this goddamn narration. Seriously, compare these scenes.
Overhead, a squadron of planes moved into readiness. It was no different from war. On the streets, mobile units began taking up their positions. The ominous drone of planes overhead gave us all a feeling of the size of the operation.
It's staggering. This is one of my favorite scenes of the original film, calling back to the horrifying uncertainty of war and preparation of attack.
Hey, what's up?
One of the convicts threw a fit.
Ah, what a guy.
Well, at least
Well, I'm not sure why you're going to bring up that scene with the convicts when in the original, the convict says like one of the, like, it's, I forget what number it is, but he says one of them had another epileptic seizure and he's like, again? So if we're going to talk about how, like, because he mentions how nonsensical the convict scene is already, criticizing the American dubbing for it just feels like cherry picking to score more points and say like, oh yeah, oh my goodness, it's so bad that the Americans, no please, no, you deserve it. 05L. 05L is in chat, guys. Sup, Convoy, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Happy Thanksgiving. And no, it's not because I want to show anime girls, or is it? But that's always such an easy example to bring up when people talk about like good or bad dubs.
the monster action gives this film something to look at and a brief break from all the awful dialogue. It's dubs like these that breed a very poor perspective of these movies. No one cares about the humans because they're presented so painfully that they just want to see the monster fights. And it's not just because it's a highlight, it's because it's the only thing to shut the movie up. And why does Kobayashi sound like a cartoon character?
Hey, man.
It's Zimcast, sponsored by Meta. As for Kobayashi sounding like a cartoon character, does Kobayashi sound like a cartoon character, or is it because that voice became associated with cartoon characters, and as a result, that's why you think he sounds like a cartoon character? Because I'd say like most of the cartoons that he plays in are predated by Gigantis.
What did you say? Oh, very good, sir. Tukioka will love the change of scene.
Oh, because he's voiced by Paul Frees, an actor who has done a lot of cartoon work in the Golden Age. I guess because Kobayashi is the side character, or less flattering reasons, they decided to have him be a goofball
Again, prove the less flattering reason, you smug fuck.
in this version. Ironically, when he's the only character with an ounce of personality. And, well, I guess he still is, but damn, it's just mean now. If you felt he was
Wait.
the only character with an ounce of personality. And, well, I guess he still is, but damn, it's just mean now.
So he has a unique voice, but he's the side character with a lot of personality, so therefore giving him a unique voice would just make sense instead of it being mean or secretly racist.
Now, if you felt that the Japanese cut dragged, it's infinitely worse on the US cut. The parts of the film that were already boring get multiplied by 100 here. It's insufferable.
Such as? We've got like 2 minutes left. I'm sure you can explain that in 2 minutes.
Really. Most bizarre is that the end of the film has little to no narration. Usually, in a monster film like this sci-fi flick of this era, Hollywood at least, you'd have scientists explaining their convoluted plans around these moments.
Yeah, because there isn't a scientist in this movie, so therefore they don't have the trope that you're saying it would have. Wow. That's crazy.
Enough, they finally let the film speak for itself here, and they ruined it.
And tears came into my eyes, and I...
But you just said there's yeah, there's still going to be narration because there's been narration this entire time. And yes, the film will speak for itself when necessary for it to speak for itself.
Spoke to him. Kobayashi, to you with our gratitude.
The ending shot is replaced with more stock footage and recycled footage from earlier in the film. This was a scene earlier in the movie. I swear, they just did not care. As if racism, narration...
Oh, there it is. There it is again.
Poor writing and poor editing weren't all bad enough, but the score is also a mess. I mentioned earlier about the opening, but it persists throughout the whole film. The original score is one of the big highlights of the Japanese film, but here, only some snippets of it remain, while most of it was replaced with stock music or OSTs from other sci-fi flicks of the era. The entire localization of this movie is an insult. You can make a decent argument on Raids Again being a movie that still has value. A decent but flawed movie, sure. But Gigantis, the Fire Monster, is one of the worst films in the Godzilla catalog, and let me tell you, there are some absolute donkey duke entries in this.
And more Godzilla's Revenge slander. I would love to pose the argument if they never if this was just a straight dub for the most part, they replace Gigantis with Godzilla again. So every time when they mention Gigantis, it's just Godzilla. I wonder how many people would think that it's just a poor dub, because then in that case, it's not a unnecessary change being applied. And another thing I just remembered, I think another reason why people think that the names of the monsters are confused is due to the fact that since they have Godzilla roar more in the American cut, and it's Anguirus's roar, people then assume, oh, they call Gigantis the Gigantis member of the Anguirus family. He has Anguirus's roar. Therefore, at some point in the film, they confuse the two.
Series, US cuts included.
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles, you know.
I do not mind that line, and I don't mind that delivery, because like most people consider Minya to already look goofy. If he has a Barney Rubble-esque like voice to him, I think that just suits his character better than his voice in the sub, where he just sound like, I think it is a woman that does his voice. So as a result, it just feels more off to me anyway. It's like the same thing with like just characters in general, like younger boys, when their voices are done by women. Sometimes they hide it very well and you can't tell, but then other times I can tell that it is a woman. But that's mainly sometimes admittedly due to the fact that I've heard the voice several times in the past. So I know that it's a female actress playing that character. But still, like, that's such low-hanging fruit, and it feels like it's just there to score points with the audience because everyone knows that you make fun of Godzilla's Revenge.
And admittedly, it's been years since I watched most of the Showa dubs, not since I was a kid. I'm a little scared to revisit them now because they couldn't be any worse than this, could they?
Oh, there's the least I could do. What you are looking at, gentlemen, is the formation of the world millions of years ago, as science has been able to reconstruct it for you.
I mean, just 3 years prior, King of the Monsters came out, and it wasn't anywhere as offensive as this. I guess now I owe those other dubs a revisit soon. Well, how do you guys feel about Raids Again? Do you think it's got some redeeming qualities, or do you find it one of the worst films in the bunch? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you haven't already.
No, we're not leaving a like. So, interesting enough, another thing I wanted to bring up about the dub, and this is not going to be more apparent, is not this gentleman right here, but Hugo Grimaldi. So, what he's done is pretty small when it comes to like his editing work, but what was notable when I was doing research for the stream was he had done work on this film I Bombed Pearl Harbor, or also called Storm Over the Pacific. And what's interesting to know is this was a Toho production, and reception wise, people criticized the dub for it, which I think in this case just either speaks to the fact that Grimaldi just maybe wasn't that good of a dubber, or like the studio he worked with wasn't that good as a result. But yeah, and then I also think like Ilb, again, I don't know how to say his last name. I just say it as Melchior. he is like, at least his actual personal life is super interesting. I recommend anyone who is looking to like about him looks at the other stuff he did do. Although interestingly enough, he also did co-write Reptilicus. And I wanted to pull up this interview here where he talks a little bit about Godzilla Raids Again. And that just speaks to the fact that, like, at a certain point, some information is going to be lost because when he's asked about the volcano monsters, I'll just read everything here. Like, let me zoom in for everyone's probably just so it's better on your eyes. It says, all right, sometime in early 1957, three producers, Harry Rybnik, Edward Barson, and Paul Schreidman contacted me and asked me to perform a rather interesting task. I had worked with Harry Rydnick on a film called Live Fast, Die Young, where he was producer, and I had written the script for it. These three people had acquired a Godzilla film called Godzilla Raids Again from Toho, and Schreidman retitled it to Godzilla the Fire Monster. So already he's just misremembering. But they didn't like the story, and they wanted to make a new film out of the existing one. They wanted me to rewrite a new script using all the specific effects using all the special effects from the Japanese film, but with a new story, and with all the Japanese actors replaced with American actors. It was quite a challenging job, so I took it on. At the time, I was working with another writer whose name was Ed Watson, who I literally like found nothing on. Like, this is all I could find, and all his contributions are this right here. So there's that. And together we constructed a new film around the existing special effects that showed the monster and the destruction that it wreaked. Erect and all this sort of thing, but all with new actors. Our final script was dated, so that would be May 7th of 57. It was accepted by Rydnick, Barson, Schreidman. These three producers had a production/distribution deal with a company called ABBT. When in July of 57, the company closed down. Now, for whatever reason that I have no idea why, they did not replace the production/distribution company, and the volcano monsters bit the dust. I don't know if a copy of the script still exists somewhere. It's possible that I have it somewhere, but I have no idea where. If so, it's 50 years after the fact, so I don't know whether I have anything. This is the information that I dredged up from my records. I hope that is of help to you. And then someone asks him anything else, and he's like, absolutely not. I have no idea what it was. And so, like, again, it's just unfortunate. Either way, either version of Raids Again is nowhere near the most offensive kaiju film. That is indeed the truth. If Gigantis is public domain, what about Anguirus? So, like I'd said in that video years ago, the thing with Gigantis is that because it is not like a trademarked character or trademarked name, it is something that you can use kind of in its own like small little way. And since like if you wanted to design something in homaging Godzilla but calling it Gigantis, you'd have to do a lot to distinguish yourself from it, and me using the name as sort of like a pastiche of the original character. But then as for your question itself, what about Anguirus? So Anguirus probably would never enter the public domain anytime soon because the character Anguirus is still trademarked, controlled. As a result, there's nothing you can really do about it. And since Anguirus' name never really changed, even though spellings may change, the intent behind the character is that Anguirus, Anguillus, Angorus, it's all the same. Whereas with Gigantis, the intent behind the character was to be something wholly different and separate from Godzilla. And as for most offensive, 05 as usual says an 05L and says the Polygon trilogy because of the Bel Saludo. 05, I would love to see some actual good reasons in Discord for that being the case, but I doubt I will find a good reason. But what about Killer of the Living? Well, that's a title, not an actual character, so you can use that title for something. There's that. As for what I would say is the most offensive kaiju film, I guess you could argue, I don't know, maybe like that's not even something I like think about, because it's like, why? Like what value is there in dredging that up? Like, obviously I worded it in a similar way where I have most offensive in big bold letters for the viewing, and I think that's literally the only reason why it's worded like that. It's because you could pull like maybe a little bit to argue, oh yeah, it's racist and offensive, even though like it's a leap, a jump and a half over a fucking bridge. But that's just me. And really, like, I think there's just not much else to say. I feel like this type of video, this style of it, hopefully is dying soon. Like you see less of these, like, oh, this and this is problematic for like reasons that are entirely bullshit and made up because I try to make a bunch of conclusions that I don't do enough research on. And like because he used the L word, literacy, media literacy. Hopefully that like continues to die down and we have more people really examine these things with a little bit more merit and honesty behind them instead of trying to farm clicks. I don't think I even ever recall them calling the Bill Saluto monkeys in the anime trilogy. I could be very wrong. I haven't seen them in a little while, but yeah, like they look like kind of like dark space dwarves with horns and stuff. So that's a stretch and a half. That's the same level of logic as this video. So once again, a common O5L as per usual. I think the difficulty of asking that question is because of our different viewpoints on what constitutes as offensive. No, I don't think so. I think like in a lot of cases, people don't have a well-constructed idea as to what like offense really means. And as such, will perceive almost anything and everything as an offense. But that's just me. Like, I don't think, and I think it really is people like that who aren't willing to have those kinds of conversations. But I think I'm rambling a little bit too long. I wanted this to be a small little video, give you guys something to watch, talk about, and consider for Thanksgiving. Be thankful, everyone. And because I know for a fact, I am very much thankful to the few of you who are watching this and listening to me ramble on and be mad at strangers online. But that's just me, guys. You can follow me almost anywhere. You just have to add an OG in front of it on Twitter if you want to see me yell at strangers on Twitter, a YT behind it if you want to see me yell at people on PlayStation because they play badly. But I'm pretty much Zimzilla everywhere else. Donating to the Patreon really helps. I'm still doing some stuff for Kaiju Quarantine, which I do have the subtitle for it, and it does have Gigantis in the title. But yeah, there's some videos coming along the way. I have some shorts already prepped. And my editors have a few more things ready. I think I will maybe do some Gigabash for a little bit. I'll stay in a lobby. I will have what that lobby's code is for anyone who wants to play. I know, where is he? Where is that boy? Vic! Kaiju not. He still owes me 1v1. Do best of 3 on that. But yeah. There's that, guys. Thank you all for watching. Happy Thanksgiving. Be thankful. Spend more time with your families and enjoy the rest of this day, this night, because I know I will. And as always, guys.
Semper Fi, motherfucker.